Good morning. I just want to spend a few minutes going through in a little more detail the potential funding for this project. We kind of breezed over it at the last meeting and want to spend some time on that subject. The cost of the system, and we've kind of broken it out, there's really two projects. There's the software upgrade and the reappraisal process is really two separate projects. The estimate is, or the cost for the upgrade of the system is $2,956,000. The one number that's estimated on here is the hardware at $200,000. This would be the servers, the PCs, the tablets that are required for the offices. So that is, the $200,000 is an estimate based on what we know today. The reappraisal is $1.7 million with a total cost of $4,656,000, and the annual maintenance going forward would be $184,000. And just to make sure that we're clear, the annual maintenance would cover any upgrades to the system going forward, but there could be implementation costs with an upgrade depending on how much is done in-house with our IT department and how much is required from the vendor for data conversions or special reports. So there is additional cost for upgrades to the system going forward, but it's very minimal. And I think last time I just want to make sure that we state that clearly in this meeting. Okay, so financing the option of the upgrade. The IS World upgrade, the potential funding source could be through the GMA lease purchase program. The annual payments would be spread over 5 years, beginning in FY16, between $550,000 and $600,000, depending on when the lease is actually closed. The interest rate would be set, but based on the rates that we received, it would be around $550 at this point, but it could be up to $600. And the funding source for the repayment would be the other lost infrastructure technology improvements. And the impact to the future OLOST infrastructure allocations is represented in the far column in the FY16 option. And I just wanted to make sure Council is aware that we would have to reallocate the other lost allocations from the projects that are currently funded through OLOST, and $600,000 would be diverted to this upgrade lease repayment. And I provided you the FY14 budget as well as the FY15 budget, so you can see where those allocations have been in the past. In FY15, in the current fiscal year, there was a reserve created to assist with the fund balance requirements of $2,448,000. That particular reserve was not in the FY14 budget. So I wanted to provide you a couple years so you could see the allocation of the projects. And what I've done in the FY16 option is spread that $600,000 between the other projects. You could reduce just one. For example, you could say, well, we're not going to have any stormwater allocation next year, and we're going to divert all of that. But in this example, I kind of spread it amongst the IT allocation, roads, facilities, and stormwater. And I'll be happy to answer any questions about that reallocation. This is just an option. On the reappraisal.
We have Councilor Woodson with a question. Wait, hold on a second. Jeremy, can you open her mic, please? Is it on? There you go. Councilor
Pam,
Woodson.
thank you. Good morning. When you say reallocate some of these fundings, what projects will not be completed then? Do we have a listing of those projects? What projects would it affect that it would have to wait until we can recover the funding again?
Let me just walk through those. The IT project at $210,000, $125,000 of that is a payment that's made for the server storage requirement. So the balance is for replacement of PCs throughout the government. So the allocation in FY14 was $250,000, and FY16 would be $210,000. So they would have less funding to allocate for replacement of PCs throughout the government. Stormwater, at 750,000 is their typical allocation. They would be at 630, and this would be pipe replacement and pipe rehab. There's not a specific project that's in the queue, but they do have plans for replacement of pipe, and they allocate based on the priority for stormwater as well as roads. This is for resurfacing. So the allocation at 2.6 million in 16 would be 2.2 million. So there would be less streets resurfaced going forward for that 5-year period than what we've seen in the past. And then facilities is for improvements if there's a roof that needs to be replaced, or an air conditioner that goes out that they need funding for. Their allocation would go from 650 to 750 to 630. So it just lowers their allocation for those types of projects.
Okay, and the questions I'm asking is not that I'm against any upgrades or anything. I have to answer to people later, and I want to be able to answer to them, because we're saying that as we do this upgrade to provide on the technology and to move us forward and be able to collect more funding, we're going to go ahead and reallocate some funds where some requests that have been done by the taxpayers won't be completed in that time period. And that's what I want to, get a better understanding. Now, once let's say we went and we upgraded all this, and it's supposed to bring funding back to the, back to the general budget, is that funding going to be reallocated back to these areas that we took the funds from, or it's just going to go just into the general fund? Because I know if I'm a constituent, just a constituent, and I don't know a lot about technology, and I don't know a lot about the necessary of upgrades to collect funds, and I hear you're going to take money from resurfacing my street to give someone a computer or a tablet, I would raise concerns. But I think that if we were to say, we're going to go ahead and take this funding to make this possible to generate more funds, and as the funds come in, we're placing it back, and I'm just using the roads as an example, into that area, I think the phone calls that we will become less. Because I like all the great ideas in upgrading, but we got to be able to answer to our taxpayers and say, a good example is like Forest Road. It waited, 15, 20 years, Evelyn? 30 years. That's what I want to know. I mean, I don't have a problem with it. I want to know, what are we going to do to replace that funding so our taxpayers know that we're not just taking it away and never putting it back, and that their streets are not going to be taken care of, or if a pipe broke, it's not going to be taken care of. That's what I need a better understanding.
When the system is implemented, and if the digest grows, that additional revenue is split between those funds that there's millage rate applied, which includes the general fund and includes the stormwater fund, paving, and economic development. So as the tax base grows, and if the potential of the system allows for the digest to grow, then the revenue collected in those particular funds would grow. It will not impact the other lost fund. So there wouldn't be additional funds put back in the other lost. It's kind of a separate funding source, but you would have additional revenue generated in stormwater and paving, which in essence would go back into stormwater projects and paving and resurfacing projects in kind of a different funding source. So it might not be a one-for-one exchange directly out of this particular fund going back into this particular fund, but there is an offset to that.
And the offset will be that we can generate the money if we needed it from the general fund, since the funding is coming back into the general fund.
The general
Am I
fund,
correct?
paving fund, and stormwater fund.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. The Mayor Pro Tem was saying whatever council was in place at the time to make those decisions. Councilor Thomas.
I want to make sure, too, that the stormwater and the roads funds are, at this point, there are separate funds for those that do not include the money that we're looking at here that's from the OLOS, right?
That's correct. The stormwater and the paving have two funding sources. The paving fund, which is from millage, and then the other lost allocation. Same for stormwater.
Okay. And while you have labeled this as the FY16 option, as I understand it, we're looking at about this 600,000 for over a 5-year period. However, by implementing this program, we are able to bring in additional revenue, we may want to go back and revisit where we take the 600,000 from and how the allocation is. Is that a correct statement?
That's correct. That's correct.
Okay.
Council could choose to, in future years, if the revenue generated in the general fund exceeds expectations, they could make the GMA lease purchase payment from the general fund as opposed from the other loss fund and reallocate those. That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. We have Counselor Allen.
Thank you, Mayor. Pam, help me understand the reserve, the 2.4 million. Is that going to be used in this formula to fund the project?
No, the $2,448,000 was done in the FY15 budget to meet the 60-day fund balance reserve for our general operations.
Okay, so it's not a part of the formula. I know we talked about it in past years, well, several years. I think it was the first year that the mayor came in that budget cycle. We were talking about setting up a reserve for vehicle replacement. Is that still ongoing, and this formula does not disturb any of that monies?
We do have a reserve in the public safety other loss. This is just the infrastructure. And in the infrastructure, there was not an allocation for vehicle replacement. That was in the public safety.
Okay, well, I know I'm mixing two different subjects now, but I would like for us to think about vehicle replacement in the general fund as well. I think that's necessary, and it should be a proactive issue that we take, simply because of the fact that it's going to cost more if we don't set up a fund to do that through the sales tax. So that was my only concern here, was to make sure that those budgetary items were not affected.
That's right.
Thank you.
It's a very good point. And certainly our hope is if we can get this new revenue system in place, there would be more fruit for those types of things, but we do need a proactive plan and have done some of that, but even more is required. Councilor Baker.
Thank you. Pam, so the FY16 option under the reserve, is the assumption that you won't need any amount in the reserve to meet the 60 days?
That's the assumption at this point.
Okay. Thank you.
We won't need any additional allocation from other loss to maintain the 60-day reserve. The 2.4 million would still remain in the reserve from 15.
Okay, so the zero means additional.
That's correct.
Because it looks like on here it's been eliminated.
The reserve would still exist, but this would be allocation of FY16 funds, but the reserve created in 15 would still maintain a reserve.
Okay, thank you.
David, did you have something you wanted to add?
Well, Pam had already addressed it, but on the roads, there's a third funding source on roads, and that, of course, is the T-Splice discretionary that we have come to council, and there would be an allocation within those funds each year for resurfacing, in addition to the paving fund and the other lost. So that we would have a third source of funding on roads, and if we needed to apply additional funds for road resurfacing or road projects, we could look at reallocating some of the T-Splice discretionary each year to supplement.
Councilor Thomas.
Mr. Anderson, I personally wanted to make sure that I understood that by, for example, under the roads decreasing by $400,000 did not mean we were going to not do everything that these other funds provide. We
Right.
still have money in these other funds to do this. We're not gonna stop paving roads
Right.
in order to do this.
Exactly
We,
right.
we have money in other funds to do that. And
Right.
I just wanted to make sure that I had that straight. Thank you.
And this may be more for Randy, Pam, or Mr. Chester. Now, as you go forward, and I know we have people here from Tyler to negotiate, it is our understanding that this is all-inclusive, that there will be some support required of our IT, but I think it was cleared up yesterday that this price tag includes the vendor largely taking on the burden of this conversion process. And that's, in the past, you know, we've had the whoops, big surprise. Our price actually included you all doing all that, and we don't want any surprises.
Yes, that is correct. They will be here from the very start up through the time that we go live with it and stay with us for a period of time to make sure we know how to run it. And we will be more than happy to let the Tyler project manager answer that if we need to.
And I don't think that's necessary, just so long as we make sure that's negotiated into that, and also the support that would, and training, thank you, the training and support that would be necessary as we go forward. I mean, these are critical databases, obviously. And if there's a snafu along the way, we're going to need expert support, and we're going to expect partners in that process.
Sure,
So,
absolutely.
okay. Let's see, how long has Tyler been doing this type of work? That would be, I guess, tax assessor, tax record support.
Since 1938.
1938, okay, all right. So you've been around the block once or twice?
Around a few times.
Okay. All right, great. Well, good. And we heard some information last time about how cities have added to their revenue by reassessing and having a more efficient system. So we appreciate you all being here, and that was good information. Anything else from council? All right, well, we'll put it back on this. Oh, is there more? Okay. Proceed, Pam.
Okay, the second part of this particular project is the reappraisal. And the funding source for the reappraisal, this would not qualify for infrastructure, other loss, would be the general fund. In FY15 is $490,000. The cash payment for that is delayed to FY16. So in FY16, the requirement is $660,000 plus the $490,000 that's been deferred from FY15. FY17 is $550,000 for the total of $1.7 million for the reappraisal project. That is an estimated 4 days of fund balance over a 3-year period. There is potential and possible increase in the digest to offset the cost of the reappraisal, but that's no guarantee. We've seen examples, and they've talked about examples from other communities, but that is the cost associated with the reappraisal process. And I feel that I need to remind council that there are other competing needs for the general fund. We just went through the FY15 budget. There were a lot of reductions from departments, so there's some competing needs for the general fund, economic development, and there's other projects out there that are competing for the general fund, and I just want to make sure that council is aware of that. This does have potential revenue offset to that, but at this point, there's not a guarantee. So council needs to understand that this does impact the general fund and will impact fund balance over this 3-year period for this reappraisal project.
Okay, Councilor Baker.
And but part of that's assuming that we don't, during the budget process, shift funds from somewhere else to
That's
cover it.
correct.
And we don't have to pay it out of fund balance if we
That's
think
correct.
we feel like we can reduce somewhere else, shift the funds to here.
Absolutely.
Right.
And also, I believe it's the same time period that the BTW revitalization kicks in. Did we clarify those funds, or any of those going to have to come out of fund balance or community development? Has that been clarified?
We'll have a plan to come back to council on the funding for Housing Authority, and I don't know if David, you want to add
Didn't they
to that?
postpone those for 15? We were able to talk them into postponing for 15, but you're right, they would be in
They'll
16.
come up in
Well,
16.
that's my concern.
Yeah.
the technology and the revitalization all hit at the same time at the same fund balance, that's gonna be an issue.
Yeah.
And we'll have to wrestle with that. Okay, thank you.
Yep, limited funds, no doubt. David, did you have something on that?
Well, just to reiterate what Pam had said, that we are looking at another funding option for that to bring back to council. We need to get a couple of questions answered first, but we will be bringing that back at some point in the future to talk about the BTW redevelopment funding.
Mayor Pro Tem.
One of the things I just want to say is, I hope the public understands this is not something that we want to do to make everything look pretty, but this is a necessity that's long overdue. We have an antiquated system. There are appraisals that haven't been done because we haven't been able to get to them. And I really have a feeling that there's stuff out there that we don't know we have out there. So it's not just a do-good situation, it's a do-must.
Thank you. It looks, Pam, like that's anything else from council? All right, well, timeline, we will bring it back for the city, on the city manager's agenda next week. So if there's any questions for an approval, that's correct, isn't it?
That's
That it'll be brought back next week for approval, for purchase. Is there something more?
Well,
Yep, let me see. Here you go.
The two funding sources is somewhat of a concern to me. I think that using the OLOS money for that piece the money's there, it's an acceptable use, that's what we ought to do. I'm somewhat concerned with the reappraisal piece of this, just because it's much more fluid, I guess. And so I don't know if we want to, can we do the hardware, software without doing the reappraisal? And if we do that, what impact would that have? I don't want to do that. I would like to do it all at the same time, but.
And our concern is if we get the current software with hardware to run it, are we going to be putting bad data into a good system? And
Right.
not that our existing data is bad, but we feel like we need to make sure that we have the best available data going into the new system.
Right.
Yeah, otherwise, we're not achieving the efficiency and the results that we're hoping for.
And I want us to do that.
Yes, ma'am.
I want us to have the money. I'm a little nervous that our finance director has not said, go forth and do. On the OLOS, on the hardware, software, I feel like we pretty much have a go forth and do statement, but I'm a little nervous about the other piece of it, and I don't want us to, it's all well and good to have the good software, but as you say, if we're putting trash in, we get trash out.
Yes, ma'am.
And that's where the recoupment would come,
Yes,
is from the
ma'am.
reappraisal. So the software
Yeah.
doesn't bear the fruit we're looking for. It's the
Right.
reappraisal and finding these pieces that have fallen through the cracks over the years. And so that's where you would have the offset.
Yeah. We'll
That y'all
find
find.
pieces that have not been, that's not on the digest, improper homestead exemptions, and property that is simply not valued correctly. For example, if someone has made an improvement, but it's never been picked up on the digest, then this will take care of that.
And I do want to underscore what the Mayor Pro Tem said. I heard some folks say the other day, so you're going to give tablets to all these people in the tax assessor's office? We sure are, because that's the equipment that they need to go out into the field to reassess this, to assess property. It's not for them to check their Facebook page, and they know that.
Well, we would
They
probably have
don't
to take
do
cell
that,
phones away from them.
so I just want to be sure that what the Mayor Pro Tem said, this is not just so they'll have something cute to play with.
Well, that's
They
just
don't
what.
do that. They
That's
don't
today's
do that.
technology, quite frankly. You're right.
They don't do that. So Mayor, when we bring this back, I don't know if we want to do it in two parts or if we want to, you know,
It's really a package deal. I'm not sure that doing one part without doing the other part
Okay.
is the best use of our funds. I feel like
Okay.
if we're going to maximize it, we need to do both at the same time.
thank you, Mr. Lomax, I
Yeah.
appreciate that.
And certainly not to speak for Pam, she can speak for herself, but I will say from conversations we've had, it's not that she's not excited about the possibilities. I think it's more feeling it's just such a political decision in the proper sense of the word political, meaning those people who are elected to make the decisions as to how money will be expended and what it will be expended for. It's just right into the legislative bailiwick, you know. Counselor Woodson. Oh, I'm sorry, Clifton, did you have something that?
Not until the end.
Okay, all
Go ahead.
right, Counselor Woodson.
Okay. I agree in bringing it the whole package instead of piecemealing, but I'm a little bit concerned with Councilor Baker's comment with the BTW coming at the same time period and how that would affect our fund balance. At least before we take the vote, if someone can sit with me or we can discuss it, we can talk, so I feel a little bit more comfortable. And the reason saying is, I agree with this because I see it all over. I don't have a problem with it. But the way our balance is right now, how we had to give our employees more cost and insurance, how we're going to deviate some other areas in order to make this possible. We had a beautiful presentation for Midtown and possibly City Village, but yet there's still old concerns that we haven't addressed. And I like this because it brings more money in that we can kind of address those. But I'm a little bit I don't know what the word to use. I'm just like, is it all going to work out? Are we going to have sufficient fund? Are we going to ask more of our employees for less because we're doing A or B? You know, is this going to, okay, we're going to take what you said, four days out of the fund balance. How many more days are we going to take out of it in 16 for BTW? Then how much is it going to leave us for our ranking? Because that's how I understand it, that it's all about the ranking so that we can get other bonds or refinancing or other things. I don't know if this is the right setting to discuss that, but I need, before the vote, I need some clarification on that portion of it.
Yeah, and Counselor Woodson, you hit on all the right things. That's what we struggle with the budget. I will say this, you know, of course, I worry a lot about maintaining our bond rating because it's the seal of a well-run city, and we wouldn't want anything less. And all of the decisions we've had to make to maintain a well-run city have been very tough. At some point, though, unless we're just going to get smaller and smaller and smaller and die through attrition like a Detroit, we have to do some of these things that invest in our future to return the fruit of the field. And I'm afraid that we've really waited a very long time. You know, who knows where we would be if we had done this 8 years ago or 10 years ago. Maybe we would have more room to breathe a little bit. And it's just getting to the point, this is my personal, I guess, political opinion, as I said, in the good sense of the word, and that is that we have to do something to invest in the revenue side of the balance sheet. And if we don't, we'll just be cutting and cutting and cutting, and soon it'll be jobs and services, and you know, we have to grow the pie of the city. So,
And I
Yeah.
understand that. I don't have a problem with that. I just have to be able to look at myself in the mirror
sure.
and look at my constituents and answer their questions and feel comfortable about it. I had no problem once you explained to me how it works. I have no problems with the gentleman, and I agree with him even before he spoke, that we shouldn't piecemeal it. But when Councilor Baker reminded us about BTW, that's where I got a little bit concerned, because at your last portion of it, you said we'll take four days out of the fund balance for 3 years.
Over a 3-year period.
For over a 3-year period. And then will BT come in 2016? We're gonna take from that fund balance again, aren't we? Or I'm misunderstanding?
Unless there's another department or another budget that would be reduced so that the general fund's in balance, which is also an option.
Okay. And see,
Using
and
fund
that's
balance, I
what I'm-
guess, is the worst-case scenario.
Right, and that's where I need, and I don't know if this is the, the right setting, maybe we just need to talk later. But that's my concern, because I want to make sure that the taxpayers listening understand very clearly, and our employees understand very clearly, because lots of times when we have to cut things, it's really not so much services, it's mainly our employees that it affects. I want to be able to look at any employee in the face and feel confident in explaining what we're about to do and what's going to happen. And like I said previously, and I'm repeating myself, I don't have a problem with this. I just have a concern now that we say in 16, the BT project is also going to affect this. That's where I'm uncomfortable right now. And I don't know if uncomfortable is the correct word. I just need more understanding and more clarification. How can I explain this to someone else? The
And
importance of what we're doing and why our fund balance will be less days, that our appraisal time might be less. How would it affect the overall picture?
And
That's all I'm
The one thing with
asking.
this particular project is there is potential to increase the digest. That is definitely different than most projects that we bring to council, is this one has the potential to generate revenue. And without it, you wouldn't have that.
And I understand this, and let me tell you why I understand this, because Commissioner Hoff has sat with me before and explained to me how there are properties out there and cases out there that we're not aware of, that we need to go after, where they have a lot bigger attorneys than we do. I mean, I remember these things, so that's why I'm in support of it. And the tendency that the gentleman said there's properties out there that have done remonetization and aren't there. But there's also a part out there that, and I know this for a fact, that if a person's home, we call the fire department or something, they reappraise that house, and that property can be almost falling apart, and they're paying 2 and 3 times more than that property is worth because of that phone call. And that I'd like to discuss later, because if this is supposed to help, find, the properties that we're not addressing, we also need to be careful with the properties we are addressing. And that's something that,
I wholeheartedly agree with you, and I would encourage you to call me and explain to me what you're talking about when.
I will.
In terms of properties being assessed based on a fire department call. I don't understand that, and I would love to investigate that. But yes, I mean, it's going to address both the good and the bad. If there are properties that are being overassessed, unless there's a homestead freeze that applies to it, this will correct it. If there's properties that's been underassessed, this should correct it. If there's properties that are not being assessed, if there's an improper homestead, all of those inequities or mistakes should be corrected with the property review.
okay, thank you.
All right, Counselor Baker.
Thank you, and I certainly didn't mean to throw a wrench in anything. Long-term, this has to be done. This goes far beyond even the terms that we will serve. This has to be done. But once you get into general fund spending, nothing's going to be easy. It's an exercise council will just have to work through. There are going to be some things that have to get shifted around, and it's going to upset some people. The general fund is not going to be an easy issue. We're just going to have to fight through it. So, but that's why we're here. We'll just have to do that. But it probably, and my objective is never to tell you to do or not do. It's just understand the issues and understand what you're doing. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem.
I was going to say what Mike said, but I also want to add to the conversation that this will not have an impact on the property tax freeze.
No, ma'am. You're absolutely right. It will not have any effect.
So I don't want
on the
anybody listening to think that we're trying to sneak in, lift the property tax freeze, and raise our taxes. We can't do that.
You know, this is probably a politically incorrect statement to make. I wished it could, but it won't. It has no effect.
All right, well, it looks like that's it. Clifton, did you have a comment to make?
Just one, I wanted to say I have worked with the Board of Assessors and the Tax Commissioner since the 1980s, and of course, some of that 1980s software is still in use. And I want to publicly thank Randy Lomax, who's worked with them not quite as long as me, for taking the lead on this to bring this to everybody's attention. This is a critical infrastructure need, and we appreciate y'all's leadership.
Thank you. Thank you very much. All right. Again, thank you to our guests that came down and our elected officials. It's good to see the tax commissioner and our assessor too. And so thank you all for coming and joining us.